I miss this little crew. The new one feels so enterprisey, right? Did you know the change to make this crowd reflect the global Rails community a little better was kicked off by one of RailsConf's keynote speakers? Of course it did. There we go. 2019's Ariel Kaplan opened the issue after talking to members of the core team at a conference. He said so in his keynote, which was about how the stories we tell to those who are new to a community can shape the way they view our group and their place in it for years, forever maybe. When it fit the theme of the Rails branding, this was a subtle but meaningful change. Hey there, cats and kittens. Hi. Oh, I didn't expect that. That's so nice. My name is Aji. My pronouns are they, them. And I'm a development team lead at a place called Thoughtbot. This year at Thoughtbot, our design team has been working on a refresh of the core brand. I'm loving all of the work that they've been doing, so if you haven't already seen it, this is some of their handiwork. Having gone to art school back when print was a thing, I really love seeing my teammates get all nerdy about kerning and refining specific ideas like changing the angles of the word mark to correlate to the Wi-Fi signal lines. So this was just for me to shout out my design team over at Thoughtbot. So my first RailsConf was in 2016 in Kansas City. It was less than a year after I graduated boot camp, around 6 months into my first dev job. If anyone had told me then that I would be on the main stage giving a keynote within 10 years, I do not think I would have believed it. Honestly, I'm not sure I believe it now. The project I wanted to share with y'all here in Philadelphia is to watch every keynote ever given at RailsConf, starting with Chicago in 2006, to try and share some relevant takeaways. As I watched, I filled up half a notebook with my thoughts. These are my keynote notes. I collected the most impactful messages from each to construct a list of key keynote notes. I only have an hour, so I had to select the most notable key keynote notes. Soon, to keep track of the hours of video I was watching, I developed a notable key keynote notes notation. To find a through line, I wrote themes from each talk onto notable key keynote notes notation note cards. And it would be July before I knew it. I'd be here delivering a notable key keynote notes notation note cards keynote. Yeah. I started up my presentation software, what else, but Keynote for my notable key keynote notes notation note cards keynote. That's the file I'm presenting from right here, Keynote app notable key keynote notes notation note cards keynote.key. Yeah. And if you'd like a copy of the work that I've done with links to the videos, please note the Keynote app, notable key, keynote notes, notation, note cards, keynote.key footnotes. You might ask, what would make me choose such a comically recursive topic? Silly rabbit. Recursion is its own reward. Really, my goal was to trick the program committee into giving me this session by repeating Keynote as many times as possible in my proposal, making this my first foray into social engineering. Does that mean that this talk shows Rails is vulnerable to session hijacking? Listen, I'm not likely to beat Aaron Patterson for the sheer number of puns, but I do want to make him work for it. If y'all keep enjoying this so much, I'm going to go over time. So I got on a call with Ufuk, co-chair of the conference, who you just met. In the process of asking me if I'd be willing to keynote, he actually said, "Yo, dog, we heard you like keynotes." And let me tell you, you have not lived until you've joined a Slack huddle and had a Ruby Central board member act out a meme from 2007. I thought this will be easy, right? An hour of content, there are 94 talks. That's only 38 seconds per talk. I'm 5 or so minutes in already, so more like 35 seconds per talk. 34 seconds per talk. See, it's getting easier by the minute. 34 seconds, though, is just not enough time to communicate a lot from most of these talks. So apologies to all the speakers whose talks I'm about to give far too little time, or those that couldn't fit at all. like Brian Cantrell, who detailed the rise and fall of Moore's Law and told us why he is still excited about the future of computer hardware. Or Paul Lemire, an engineer at Spotify, whose closing keynote in 2016 showed off some incredible projects built with the unbelievable amount of listening and music data at his fingertips. And the sign language interpreters who signed some live-generated music, showed the rhythm in their bodies, and absolutely stole the show. With this project, the idea that once it's online forever was seriously tested. All it's taken in some cases is 12 years for recordings to disappear from this earth. Of the 94 keynotes to date, 79 have videos online. The rest were reconstructed from blog posts and articles. I even reached out to each speaker to see if they still had video or slides. A few remembered their important points. Nobody had their slides. Some didn't have anything, like this message from Yehuda Katz about his 2013 keynote. Quote, "I think that's the one where I ripped up my entire talk overnight to deliver a rebuttal to DHH on JavaScript." I haven't been able to find it, sadly. So that is Portland, 2013, Yehuda Katz, if anyone has a lead on a recording. Oh, right, and I saw one Tuesday morning. The video is not yet online. 3 are panels. 1 is a podcast recording. 1 is a talk with more than one presenter. And 1 is a multimedia spoken word computer science performance art piece. Yeah, hold on to that one for a minute. And one that I didn't include, it does have a video, but in perhaps predictable Why the Lucky Stiff fashion, isn't always acknowledged to have happened and is maybe only 30% of the time even referred to as a keynote. I did this to myself because keynotes are an elevated moment in conversations we as a community are already having. Keynotes might reflect the conversations happening on Zoom, Teams, or Slack. Sometimes they'll begin or direct the conversations being tweeted, skeeted, or tooted. I said tooted on stage. Keynotes certainly shape the conversations being had at RailsConf, this annual ephemeral community of ours. During my historical eavesdropping, I've learned the inner workings of the Rails codebase and the Rails philosophy, learned to build the kind of work and the way to work that we want to see in the world, been inspired to reach outside our community and be a positive force for change. And that if we have nothing to fear but fear itself, that's recursive and we have infinite fear. There's a lot we've talked about over the years, but predictably, an evergreen topic has been to introduce the newest features of Rails. 2006 was the first RailsConf, and it introduced conceptualizing our app's domains as resources, embracing REST and learning to love the CRUD. 2007, we doubled down on RESTful principles, said hello to the doomed active resource, and mourned the loss of active web service and its first-party processing of WSDLs and SOAP. Just kidding, good riddance. Rails 2.1 was released during RailsConf 2008, and Jeremy Dare spoke about implementing performance test generators. In 2009, we heard that whenever we got someone new on Rails core, it was almost a rite of passage for them to re-implement the router. Someone must have joined the core team because 2009 saw a new router. Rails 3 comes out and uses Bundler for dependency management. And there was pushback for Bundler. Horrifying. And of course, a new router. Welcome to the core team, whoever you were. With Rails 3.1 just around the corner, we saw jQuery included as the default front-end framework, and we found out that we were all getting CoffeeScript, whether we wanted it or not. 2013 saw Aaron Patterson solve computer science with active support Haltze. He demonstrated how our test suites were going to be faster, not by making them run faster, but by improving boot time. He also warned us that not everything he says on stage is necessarily true. The Rails 4.1 train pulled into Chicago in 2014, and we got to see some caching work that went into Active Record. The excitement was high as Rails 5 was nearing release featuring Action Cable. Aaron Patterson shared that the core team comes to RailsConf for the same reasons we all do, to hear about Action Cable for the first time. Rails 5 did not yet have a release candidate. But they said it was just around the corner, and we all knew it was going to drop during the conference that year. 2016 version 5 brought a lot of changes, including a code of conduct. I mean, it would when it came out 2 days after everyone went home. Next main stage update wasn't until 2018, where we got to see some of the work that went into the forking parallelizer. And remotely in 2020, we heard from Eileen Uchitel about the long journey of upstreaming multiple database support. Another remote RailsConf in an interview format, we got the scoop on Stimulus and Turbo, Hotwire, and the email application that was its real-world testbed. 2022 didn't have much to say other than Aaron Patterson listing front-end changes he had nothing to do with. Not that he was trying to distance himself from them, just that they are front-end, and he is not. Just buckle in, Aaron. As the platform is more stable, the announcements are less groundbreaking, but hey, we can see where a route is defined now. Well, beyond the what, we often talk about the why, because Rails as a framework is opinionated. There is a Rails way, a Rails philosophy. What is this philosophy? What about it is compelling enough for the keynote stage? In 2006, Martin Fowler attributed the success of Rails to the expressiveness of the Ruby language and Rails' opinionated simplicity. You'd implement a feature in a couple of hours to be able to discuss it with the customer, quickly iterate to yield a working version based on real user feedback. He called this fire first and aim later. All possible because Rails keeps you out of the plumbing, taking responsibility itself for low-level implementation. Keeping us out of the plumbing is a common idea in Eileen Uchitel's talks. In 2020, she said, Rails takes on complexity and gets out of your way. The framework should have the point of view for what the most natural and straightforward way to use a feature is. In 23, Eileen said all of these different things that make the Rails internals difficult to understand make your code base easier to understand. Rails cares more about your application than its own internals. So much of the apps that we build are going to be the same, and by sharing those parts, we'll all work faster and better. Yehuda Katz challenged a common refrain amongst Rails detractors that by relying on common solutions, we were dooming ourselves to leaky abstractions. But we're not building Rails apps by soldering transistors here. All computing is abstractions. The bleeding edge feels leaky because it's still experimental. They forget the mountain of shared solutions they're sitting on. The job is realizing when experimentation is over, the abstraction becomes basically free, and we can build higher. But still, many of the common problems being solved in unique ways aren't actually unique problems. Instead of one-offs reinventing the wheel, Eileen urges us to have an upstream-first mentality. Share the maintenance burden, and everyone can make use of the improvements. Reiterating those commonalities in 2023, saying Rails is so much more than a framework. It's a community. Because Rails is extracted from real applications, it's based on use cases grown from production solutions. Core team members Michael Koziarski and Jameis Buck refactored an actual Rails application during their keynote. They focused on what they said should be done, showing the Rails way. Much of this advice is still familiar to us in 2025, like skinny controllers and rich models, be cautious of overriding to param for friendly URLs, and to prefer clarity over cleverness. The message being to find simplicity in understanding Rails conventions and applying them judiciously. In 2007, Jarko Lane used a metaphor of an angel and a devil sitting on our shoulders. Don't listen to the devil of over-engineering and hacking around Rails constraints. Do listen to the angel of framework features and leaning on community practices. Much like Martin Fowler the year before, Lane said Rails is about trusting the framework's simplicity and focusing on user-centric development. These speakers weren't using the familiar phrase, but they were talking about convention over configuration, #1 with a gold star amongst the Ruby on Rails feature set. Yehuda, again in 2014, introduced the term ego depletion, probably better known these days as decision fatigue. Decisions draw from the same finite pool of resources taxed by willpower, emotional regulation, planning, and organization. To spend as much time as possible on relevant choices, convention over configuration saves your resources. Because defaults are the most powerful weapon to fight against cognitive depletion. Rails doesn't leave us thinking, oh, if only my web framework had a good abstraction for databases, I wouldn't have to think about connection pooling. Brian Lyles called decisions like choosing an ORM or view templating language configuration tax and labeled it as a form of technical debt. Because in Rails' opinion, constraints are liberating. And I agree. Though my usual way to express this is that creativity happens in a box. Meant to run counter to the platitude of think outside the box, pushing against or giving in to your constraints yields a better result. And Rails gives you constraints that aren't even detrimental. I had to get something of my own in here, right? Here's another one. Small, simple objects sending messages. Nobody went to my other talks. All right. So we're going to take the first detour of the morning. Because not all the topics of the talks jump smoothly from one to the next. So let me try again for RubyConf's 25th anniversary, and I'll see what I can do. It's no secret that Rails is a darling to startups. The productivity, time to market, quick iteration cycle are all bullseyes for the needs of new software products. Though not as much in the last 10 or so years, having speakers who were involved in entrepreneurship, startups, non-technically, was a mainstay of the first era of RailsConf. Sarah Chip shared her journey of bringing a physical product, JewelBots, to market. And despite the incalculable differences between software and hardware on the face of it, so much was recognizable. She and her partners made sure to talk with their users, and they iterated with Arduinos instead of Ruby, because you can't tell your audience what they will be excited by. Hardware or software, a startup needs to listen. Be tiny until you shouldn't be. No heuristic was given. Assume that you're wrong and be open to randomness. Because a startup is a human institution designed to deliver a new product or service under conditions of extreme uncertainty. It's an experiment, not trying to answer, can this be built, but should this be built? And I feel like more startups need to watch this talk. And to Reese, the most important part of the entrepreneur's toolkit is the pivot. Entrepreneur Gary Vaynerchuk called us to action to have honest relationships through our products. Part of this session get a new life in the current context of AI. When the internet is flooded with vibe-coded garbage and conversations between agentic robots are being prioritized over conversations with people, it's going to be authentic human connection that wins the day. Y Combinator's Paul Graham spoke about how insider projects are often hindered by excessive scope and inability to take risk and the weight of expectations. While outsiders have fewer expectations and less to lose, closer contact to users, and a comfort with looking undignified. He said outsiders should embrace being small, working cheap. Focus on vertical slices. And don't imitate the flaws of successful people. This tapered off, and after 2015, we didn't have the same presence for startups, incubators, and entrepreneurship on the Keynote stage. Until Detroit. Irina Nazarova started her presentation with the question all Rails devs love to hear. No, not, but does it scale? It's not 2008. They ask, is Rails dead? I mean, hell, I've heard this for all 10 years of my career. She wanted to know why people won't give up on this question. What are they really asking? It's, are people choosing Rails in 2024? The logos of established Rails adopters are seen all over the years of RailsConf sponsor lists, Shopify, GitHub, Gusto, Chime, Beyond Finance, and more. But where are the stories of new businesses starting with or switching to Rails? The opening keynote at Detroit broke the silence, and Nadia Oduwayo enthralled us with the story of 0 to 2 million users as a one-woman dev team. Viral success built with Ruby on Rails. I'm going to let it finish taking a picture of herself. But last I noticed, the title of that talk was 0 to 4 million users as a one-woman dev team, and I hope she never stops having to update it. Irina highlighted other stories that prove what we all suspected, that the reports of Ruby's death have been greatly exaggerated. Repeat founders choosing Rails a second time with Craftwork, young founders inexperienced with serverful application architecture, rapidly growing startups on Rails, and established companies switching from Java microservices to a majestic Ruby on Rails monolith, even if at first they weren't convinced. Right, Dan? Let's continue to raise these kind of stories into the limelight. Rails doesn't need a new hype train. It's time to share this 20-year-strong hype train with new passengers. So punch your ticket to Hype Town. Choo-choo. No, I'll stop. Here we are, back on track. I guess I had one more. True that Rails cannot be separated from the context where it exists. Now, I don't mean startups, but open source. Members of the core team held a panel in '09. The question was asked, there are more of us, the community, than there are of you, the core team. What do you want the community to be doing? Well, in 2019, Aaron Patterson shared that he did this to himself. In 2019, Aaron Patterson shared that he's often stopped to be thanked by a member of the community for all of the work that he does in open source. But the real story is, thanks to us, the ones who are building companies in Rails, programming in Ruby, creating demand for the language, that's what enables him to have Ruby as his day job. Gratitude works in both ways. Xavier told us in 2022 the story of building Zeitwerk, all on top of a deprecated language feature Matt strongly thought should be removed. Because Xavier was respectful in sharing what Zeitwerk was able to do with the deprecated feature, it created the space for Matt and the Ruby team to come to the conversation in the same way. They could have a technical discussions around what problems were being solved because there was no need for being defensive or protective of their time. You have to approach open source with humility. You have to know that you don't always have the same context as the maintainers. Being respectful for other members and accepting decisions about ideas that you might have, that they are the ultimate stewards of their decisions. Because all the other people out there doing open source are your coworkers. Eileen posed a question to leadership teams that don't see the value in open source work. How can Rails not be important to your product if the entire company depends on it? Investing in Rails is proactive. Rewriting an application in Go microservices is reactive. And which do you think is better for your business? Because selling this work needs you to tell a story. Features tell their own stories. Open source performance, all of those unglamorous necessities need help. So not just the panel in 2009, over the life of RailsConf, what has the core team said about our involvement? That the people reading your PRs are people to keep humility, improve the tools you rely on upstream instead of monkey patch, advocate for open source in your company, and keep showing up. If you're thinking about advocating to your leadership about investing in open source, watch this talk. 2022, Eileen Uchtel. She gives actionable strategies for framing your argument in terms that matter to their goals. And a talk to watch if you want to start contributing to Rails is this one. You'll be introduced to the Rails project governance model, low barrier ways to get involved, and a high-level tour of how the whole thing fits together, so jumping into the repo won't feel so out of reach. I know, Eileen, sorry, you're in this a lot, but if you stop saying awesome things, I will stop putting them in slides. But know that there is no expectation for you to repay some kind of karmic debt to the core team or any maintainers. It's in the language the core team uses towards the community. Sharing, gratitude, humility, a love letter. That too is part of the Rails way. It's now time for a second detour, which I've entitled, Why is Aaron Patterson? I was trying to type who is Aaron Patterson, but I typoed why, and I thought it was better, so I left it. Of the 94 keynotes, 14 of them were given by Aaron Patterson. After later today, that total will be 15, putting him at 3 more presentations than the runner-up, making him the all-time RailsConf world champion. Yeah. Marking yet another instance where an American would declare another American the world champion without a RailsConf ever having happened outside the United States. If you've seen several of his talks, you would be forgiven if you were to consider them formulaic. At first, I thought I'd be breaking new ground by saying that, but no. At least twice before, he's given away the formula, a format he calls the reverse mullet, because it's party in the front and business in the back. Not to mention the supposedly unauthorized bingo card in 2019. He'll start with some jokes about the small mom and pop shop he works for, which during his RailsConf tenure has been AT&T, GitHub, and Shopify. He'll go into some local jokes, essentially the same joke as the last step, but with local giant companies. He'll tell a story about writing a script that attempted to charge his credit card thousands of times. Respond to the opening speaker having said something bonkers that could be dangerous if left unchecked. And end with a picture of his cat. There he is. Of course, what follows is the technical part, which very often is about performance, but maybe it's a list of projects he doesn't have time to do but still wants to see happen. Or an overly complicated recreation of a common feature that takes 50 ridiculous steps and often ends in a pun. Like recreating SSL by short-circuiting assembly code into his smart fridge's ice maker, all because his manager said they were on a code freeze. His talks are usually at the end of the conference. He asks very tired brains to go on these incredibly complicated technical journeys, deep dives into the weeds, the kind of subjects that should be dry and far from compelling when half of us are still recovering from karaoke. But we don't feel like we're being taught principles for properly benchmarking or about an inline cache that happens within VM bytecode. We're laughing along, trying to uncover the longest, silliest method name defined by metaprogramming in the Rails code base. We walk away remembering that single quotes are always faster because you don't have to hold the shift key. But sneakily, he's walked us through something we never thought to try and understand and shown us that it might be a lot, but wait, I actually did get that. And maybe if performance work is something that I can tackle. I mean, at the very least, I wouldn't be trying to do it with one hand tied behind my back, only allowed to use a bootleg Super Mario Brothers ROM as an IDE. So yeah, maybe I do know a little more about Mark and Sweep garbage collection after all. Hey, wait a minute, that guy with the green screen opera gloves taught me something. Oh, that's why Aaron Patterson. Sorry. RailsConf world champion, Aaron Patterson. So just like there's a Rails way, there's also a Ruby way, and that philosophy shapes the way that Rails thinks. Rich Hickey, a proponent of functional languages and not a Rubyist, spoke in 2012 and advised rigid dedication to an opaque concept of simplicity. I would call it a rare miss in RailsConf's tradition of inviting voices from outside our community, but it did broaden the discussion, because that session came up again and again in other sessions the same year. Like James Edward Grace saying that a simple thing plus a simple thing plus a simple thing doesn't always result in a simple thing. Fellow Ruby rogue Avi Grimm said that all sufficiently large and successful systems eventually evolve into object-oriented ones. Yarr. Though Hickey's session landed flat, it doesn't mean that we are adverse to learning and understanding different approaches or languages. Enter 2001's Computer Science Performant Art, where Guy Steele and Richard Gabriel spoke 50 statements, each with exactly 50 words, about 50 different programming languages. Whether you're going to enjoy this one or not, you probably already knew 30 minutes ago when I said the phrase multimedia spoken word computer science performance art piece. In 2010, Robert Martin talked about how nothing has changed in programming since 1962. Which, if true, would have made the 50 statements piece more like 12. The language Ruby shares the most with is Smalltalk, and the comparisons were common in the early days. Avi Bryant styled himself as a messenger from the future because he comes from Smalltalk, and we could learn from their experience. He proposed some ambitious solutions to Ruby's perceived performance problems, including alternative VM implementations like Smalltalk's proprietary Gemstone VM. While that wasn't widely adopted, conversations started by Avi could be said to influence alternative Ruby implementations like JRuby and Rubinius, whose people are here and I probably just said something wrong about. Robert Martin's 2009 keynote was called "What Killed Smalltalk Could Kill Ruby Too." Smalltalk, he said, had some pretty serious projects going for it, and it disappeared nonetheless. His theory? There was an arrogance to the community. Like, our language is so good we can behave however we want, alienate whoever we want. But that was received outside the Smalltalk world with, they don't seem to like us very much, let's go somewhere else. So what's the antidote? If community can bring down an otherwise successful programming language, in 2007, Say Frank held up core values like conversation, community, and belonging, treating technology as a facilitator of human connection, reminding us that the Rails community and the web at large thrive on interaction, playfulness, and collaboration. In 2016, Jeremy Dare celebrated Rails adopting a code of conduct. He credits Ruby with setting up the kind of community that we would want to work in. Corey Haynes proclaimed the Rails community is awesome, encouraging us to keep up the mentality of sharing and supporting, reminding us that the surest way to being and staying awesome was through practice, to learn in public, to build things and share it. A great way to contribute, as well as building your own skill. Dan Melton praised the community for sharing learning and the tools that we build. He drew correlations between Ruby and activist groups, being self-organized, opinionated, decentralized, and generating a lot of stuff. What was Martin's antidote to what killed Smalltalk? He called it professionalism, the discipline of wielding power, making the active decision and effort that we're not going to denigrate people who don't share our privileges. What will save Rails and Ruby from the same demise? The community is more dynamic and larger, doesn't shoo people away. We will have humility, and we will keep the community open. Generous read on that talk, I know. That is the community we recognize, right? But it took work. Martin Fowler wrote about his time with Rubyists since 2007, and someone from The Sage said the Rails community had a reputation as a bunch of arrogant bastards and cringed as a group in the room raised a triumphant cheer. Joel Spolsky paused in the middle of his presentation to say, I just noticed there aren't many women in the audience. Tim Bray from Sun Microsystems came to RailsConf Portland to sell computers, but still pointed out that the audience was almost all men and asked the room if they were okay with that, and if not, what they were going to do about it. The same year, Dave Thomas emphasized inclusion, saying the Rails community has a real opportunity to set the standard for welcoming all people in. Martin Fowler continued in his writing about 2007 that there was a strong push from Ruby leadership to try and change all of this. A theme from several talks was that our community had an opportunity to try to lead the software profession away from this tar pit of nastiness and lack of diversity to create a community that really welcomed many types of people into a nurturing environment. Because we need to invest in new ideas. One of the things that has enabled some of the most impactful contributions of our team is hiring people with different backgrounds and ideas. A diverse team has enabled, if not led to, some of the greatest innovations that have empowered the entire community. But inclusion most often comes first. Inclusion means that beyond those diversity statistics companies like to show off, that those people have a seat at the table. Diversity and inclusion have a symbiotic relationship. Diversity can come along more easily when you prove that you're inclusive. A little water emoji tells me to drink water. Yeah, water. Ultimately, part of why we come together is to talk about the process of our work, to shape our workplaces into the kinds of workplaces we can thrive in. 2008, Kent Beck traced the evolution of software ideas like automated testing and extreme programming, and the nearly 20 years it took each idea to take hold. If 20 years is the amount of time required to shift the industry, what have we influenced about the way that we work through 20 years of RailsConf conversations? Chad Dickerson asked, why is the assembly line so dehumanizing? It deprives the worker the satisfaction of finishing a job, optimized to efficiently crank out a single step. He gave an example of an airplane factory inviting the assembly line workers to have contact with their completed planes and to talk to the pilots, the users of their output, to experience the final product. If companies really want their workers to produce, they should try to impart a sense of meaning and not just through vision statements. Allow employees to feel a sense of completion and ensuring that a job well done is acknowledged. In 2022, Vaidehi Joshi shared a story of burnout, of how we humans are hardwired for curiosity. It gives us meaning. She urged us to protect our curiosity because there isn't a chance of physical connection to what we build. Xavier worked at his new autoloader even before changing Matz's mind about the deprecation. It was his Grail project. Nurturing his creativity, delivering the solution brought immense personal satisfaction. Kent Beck challenged himself to come in front of 1,000 Rubyists and talk about feeling uncomfortable at work. Here he is, creator of extreme programming, using his platform to talk about empathy. He said, feelings are a noisy signal, but they're telling you something. Am I sure what I'm doing matters? If not, he's going to find out. Does my code work? If not confident, he takes the steps to get confident. Do I trust my curiosity? He says we have to consciously encourage ideas, because if you crush all your ideas, you're going to stop having new ones. Vaidehi didn't trust her curiosity, and it took a toll. Xavier followed his curiosity, and it benefited Rails and the whole community. Kent encourages his curiosity, and that contributes to his well-being. A consistent message about finding meaning in your work by supporting yourself, your curiosity, and your creativity. Okay, but I said creativity. Is that even the domain of engineers? I'll do it. Are we even engineers? Engineering that comes to many people's minds is civil engineering. It's the discipline that's easy to see in the built environment. In engineering of that sort, the engineer makes a specification, the builders execute the specification, and the final product is an overpass or a bridge. The construction is the most expensive phase of a civil engineering project by far. The math, the modeling, the engineering to support the builders executing correctly the first and only time. Before the early to mid-60s, this is how software was made. Engineers wrote a design document, handed it off to the programmers that would make the final product, the source code. But eventually, they said, wait a minute. We have never been able to specify a program enough to avoid a lot of iteration or just outright failure. So we shifted left. The engineers and programmers became the same people. And a shipped application is the final product. The source code isn't the output, it's the specification. But the previous thinking still ruled. Rigorous definition of requirements, overload phase 1 because phase 3 is expensive. But without heavy machinery, what is the third step? It's an automated tool chain, compilers, cloud deploys. For our work, phase 3 is by far the cheapest step. It's practically free. If we've proven time and time again that no specification is good enough to avoid iterating, and we know that iterating is the best way to build a good product, we need to stop treating phase 3 like it's the hard part. Build again and again, get feedback, build it again. In 2018, stepping in for a presenter who the travel gods thought would be better in 2019, Sarah May said that software is more like a group of theater people putting on a play than an assembly line. Maybe the problem is in the word architecture. What if software is more like Manhattan? The infrastructure and buildings already exist, but we can choose or change the interior space. But software interior designer doesn't have quite a ring to it. We're told that what you produce is your value, that meritocracy exists and will lead to a truth decoupled from our humanity. These things are a myth. Our bodies send noisy signals, but pay attention. What do we perceive when we're overrun and we find ourselves on the drama triangle? Persecutor says it's all your fault. Rescuer says, don't worry, I'll handle it. Victim, why does this always happen to me? How do you get off the drama triangle? You recognize the sensation of your body, breathe, and pause before you continue. Persecutor becomes the challenger, truth tellers but not blamers. Is that really what's happening, they ask. The victim becomes the creator, forward movement looking for wins. And the rescuer becomes the coach. See the creator in the people you support, not attached to outcome, but holding accountability. Nick Means recounted the development of advanced spy planes by Lockheed Martin's Skunk Works team in 2016. The true story of an engineering and design team that consistently took unreasonable deadlines and unprecedented requirements and turned them into machines that accomplished what no machines had done before or since. The team spent their time figuring out how to do the important things and hacked their way around the other stuff. One of these high-performance planes would drip fuel while on the runway, but no material existed to seal the tank that would survive the vehicle's staggering operating envelope. The important thing was to fly higher and faster than any other plane. How did that impossible situation become real? It was the trust that leadership put in the team. So your team should know the most important things about what you're building. You should know the goals so that you can contribute beyond just writing code. If that's not the case for you, push back hard and change it. If you're in a leadership role, make sure you're clearly communicating the 2 or 3 most important things. Give your team the context for decisions and trust them to make the right ones. Did you get that, Dan? Because culture matters. Spend time on it. Less of the right people can do more. Chad Dickerson told us about the push train at Etsy, a self-managed production deploy line. Works like an airport without an air traffic controller where the planes line themselves up on the runway. They have non-coders participate in the push train, and everyone there had pressed the deploy button more than once. Recognize what it feels like when you're hijacked. Remember your own agency and fight to give that agency to your team. Use tools to build happy communities, and your team is one of your communities. Optimize the team for the happiness of your people. What makes a user unhappy? Joel Spolsky says it's not being in control. Think of the average user's experience of Windows, constantly being told, do this, update that, being berated by the OS for 30 minutes before you can use the computer you're supposed to be in charge of. MP3 players all do the same thing, but the iPod sold millions and the Zune didn't. The best products make users feel like they have agency over their experience, even if it's been finely tailored. That's Rails. Developer experience of using Rails is top of mind as it's being designed, built, and maintained. We choose Ruby and Rails because of the joy and the work that we have, even though the end result, a server sending HTML, is the same as Django, .NET, or Enterprise Java. Shopify introduced Sorbet, and originally, Rafael França wasn't sold. Said it was a solution in search of a problem. What changed his mind? Surveys that showed the impact to the developers, not system metrics. He saw it bringing satisfaction, maybe even joy to the team. The user experience of building a system extends far beyond the technology choices. If you see a problem in the code, it's reflecting a problem in your communication structure. Doesn't then Conway's Law imply that by fixing communication and team culture, we fix our code? It's never a code problem, is it, right? Creating good habits, deciding as a team to create a space to exist in together. Don't ask for permission, but be upfront. Don't ask for forgiveness, but learn every time. Do ask for advice, but don't always take it. What if instead of a place you have to live, your code base was a place you get to live? Linear scaling is easy to achieve. is almost always enabled purely by the technology. Participation in people create hyperlinear scaling. By fighting hero culture, making it safe to question and learn, collaborating by default, and holding empathy as a core value. Teaching scales, sharing learning scales. This community here in this room makes us scale. So does Rails scale? Sure, but we do it better. Barack Obama and Michael Bloomberg said everyone should learn to code, not that everyone should have a career as a programmer. In an increasingly technologically intertwined world, everyone should have a chance to peek behind the curtain of the internet. Conversational coders, like conversational language speakers that have other roles on the team. Product people who can understand a little of the conceptual level, and customer-centric developers who understand the business needs and the user problems. Wouldn't that make for an excellent cross-functional team? Using archetypes to describe personalities on teams, Michael Lopp named stables and volatiles. Stables happily work with direction and schedules. They value efficiently run, no-drama teams, assess risks, and generate process. Volatiles hold themselves up in a room and build a thing in 3 weeks. They find thrill in risk, crave chaos, and don't care how you feel. Lopp says we need both of these folks, that both are right, also that they hate each other. A successful team must have them in balance, and they must work together. Justin Searles said that when we're taught, we learn what a program is, but not how to program. Thought process? Well, everyone is either making it up as they go or pretending they understand it. Who's going to succeed in that environment? Well, it's the people with the overconfidence of having been told they're brilliant their entire lives. Imagine you walk into a room and you lack the privilege of having been told that you're brilliant by society. If no one can actually explain what it is that we're doing and we want to make programming a more diverse and inclusive industry, Justin says we really need to solve this. So his talk introduced the Searles-Briggs Programmer Personality Test, inspired by the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, the worst type system. It assigned labels and gave us language to explain how we might think. Stable and volatile were hiding in that test. Probably even the persecutor, rescuer, coach, and creator. I was fault, by the way. Justin was salt. And as you might have guessed, that QR code will take you to a PDF version of the test. Make your code base a livable space. Remember that people scare more than machines. Be a customer-centric developer. Share your thinking, especially with those who are new. So Yehuda Katz, he destroyed the argument that shared solutions should be avoided. Rails has just proven that this is not true. One phrase from Yehuda in 2014 stood out to me because it sums up so much of what the defining phrase of the Rails philosophy means. We need to push back on the excuses that drive us apart instead of the things that bind us together. Dan Melton believes the Ruby community has values that can be a positive influence on the world, values that pervade the work that we do. James Duncan Davidson visited the Star Wars filming set in the Tunisian desert and was surprised to see in a place that felt so remote, people tweeting. Tunisia was the crucible of the Arab Spring, a nonviolent movement that caught fire throughout social networks that we all watched happen live on Twitter. Twitter started on Rails. Let's not get into it. A region of the world standing together only a handful of years after Rails knew. James wanted us to ask if we create more value than we capture, and not to stop at don't be evil. The impact of the Arab Spring didn't last the way that we had hoped. And maybe in 2025, 15-minute blogs are more closely tied to the subversion of democracy than to hope. But maybe that's a more powerful wake-up call, that our work affects the world outside of Palo Alto or Chicago. By 2019, Brady Criss knew what Davidson didn't, that we are living in the worst timeline. How can we make an impact? We see the outsized impact of our industry, but individually, we're a drop in the bucket. Brady said, be a drop in the bucket. Choose which bucket with intention, because nothing that changed the world has ever truly been created by a single person. I've always believed that just building a team that cares about how we work and dares to be inclusive can be a radical act in and of itself. There's one talk that means more to me than any of the other talks I've seen. Live, recorded, or reimagined. It's just a few stories from Marco Rogers' experience as a black man in tech. And it's one of the most memorable sessions in my RailsConf career, in my life. He called it survival tips for being black in tech, but it wasn't actually for other marginalized folks. In all likelihood, they have already discovered their own versions of them. He said, if you take nothing else away from this talk, let it be hearing from me that being black always matters. Whatever it is you're trying to do, I'm trying to do it too, but I'm trying to do it while black. And that means that the rules might be different. The tip was learning that this kind of advice even exists. And how much it dominates the experience of those that live them. I was asked to examine my participation in the systems that make simply having a day job something akin to survival. To see that not talking about politics at work only deepens the need for these defenses. Everyone has, I would hope, a personal journey towards being a better person. And this is a definitive moment in mine. And it happened at a software conference. It happened at RailsConf. So I want to ask, without RailsConf, what might we lose? I know that RailsConf isn't the only place this community exists, but it is, soon was, an important part of it. We came together here because of a web development framework, but we took much more home. Without a doubt, RailsConf created more value than it captured. Because we came here to find commonality and to push back on the excuses that drive us apart instead of the things that bind us together. We came here for the new folks who might be terrified to attend their first tech conference after a career pivot. We came here so they could walk straight into the arms of a welcoming, diverse, inclusive, inspired, and supportive group of enthusiasts. Yeah, enthusiasts for Rails. Yes, enthusiasts for community. We cannot shake that word. We are community simply by being we. I want us to persist. I want us to commit to continue to learn from those outside our community and listen to the experiences of people who are not part of our bubbles. I want us to continue admitting that we don't know everything and that we can learn from everyone. What might we lose if all the talk should be of a technical nature? You could ask, what might we lose when our viewpoints aren't challenged, we don't grow, and we only listen to things that are out of date long before we arrive at next year's hotel ballroom? Fundamentally, our values about creating software that are reflected in Ruby on Rails, built by us, the community, align very closely with our values about how we want to treat each other. You don't have to go very far these days to find someone whose rhetoric starts at divisive and goes down from there. But what this 20-year experiment has shown me is that kind of small, scared behavior is not only repugnant, but it's the antithesis of Ruby on Rails. It's the antithesis of why we've come these last 20 years to Chicago, to Portland, Las Vegas, to Baltimore, Austin, Atlanta, Kansas City, to Pittsburgh and Phoenix. It stands in diametric opposition to why we've come here to Philadelphia. The values of this community are baked into this framework. And now, more than ever, they are our shared responsibility to live.